Thank you again for taking the time with us at WHUS Radio for this interview. We have Jordan Wolowitz here. He's one of the co-founders of Governor's Ball. Thank you for joining us. He's also from Connecticut, so that hits a little close to home for us UConn people. If you just want to explain your background a little bit more, Jordan, and could you just, reiterate what led you to start Governor's Ball?
I started working in the greater music business starting my freshman year of college. I did things like interning at record labels, one of them including Atlantic Records, worked for concert promoters, interned for agencies, did things like I covered music for my school newspaper in college, really just to get free concert tickets. By the time I was going into my senior year, I kind of realized that I wanted to go into the live part of the music business because, frankly, I just loved going to shows and I was learning a lot about the business behind them. And so after I graduated from college, I went and worked for Paradigm talent agency in their music department. Since then, they've been purchased by Wasserman. So right now they're Wasserman agency, and they covered everyone from Fish to Coldplay to everything. Basically, you can look them up online. I was working in one of their offices in California, and this started in 2008. But by 2010, I was pretty eager to get back to New York because I'd already started to think about doing a festival in New York City, which had really become a dream of mine. So I was able to get a job at ICM, International Creative Management, where I worked for Marsha Vlasic, very legendary agent. And while I was there, my best friend from high school, Tom Russell, at that time he was working for Superfly, who were one of the founders of Bonnaroo Festival and Outside Lands Festival. During that year, we were working on, in our free time, working on Governor's Ball. I was discussing it with people in the industry from my Gmail while I was, using my work email to do work for ICM. And then we announced the first Governor's Ball in February of 2011, and it's gone from there.
Cool. So you mentioned all the connections that you kind of developed at these internships and working at LCM. And
it's ICM, it's international, whatever. I just wanted to make sure it's all good.
Horrible typo. At ICM, and obviously being in New York is great for the industry and starting a festival. What steps specifically did you take to kind of like get things on the ground, contract a production company, acquire a space, make the actual physical processes of the festival happen as opposed to just planning it out over email?
So our first year was on Governor's Island. It's a small little recreational island off of the southeast corner of Manhattan. They had their own board there that kind of approved or passed on private events. Unlike the venue we're in now, we just kind of worked through everything with their private board to get approval for the show. At the same time, they had just one greater producer of live events there. Our team produced Governor's Ball, but they had set stage builders and things of that sort. If your question was about the nuts and bolts of the approval and the festival, that was really it. It was it was a very small festival. It was a one-day show. The capacity at Governor's Island was only 20,000, so it wasn't too big of a lift.
Cool. So you're a co-founder of the festival. You're also a talent buyer. You helped found Founders Entertainment. For what you do now, obviously you're still involved in GovBall. Do you find yourself doing more for Founders Entertainment? Are you still involved in the process and planning of GovBall annually? Where do you find yourself spending the most time?
We've kept Founders a very small company. It's me and my partner, Tom, and then I should know this offhand, but I believe 8 employees. So we're still a very small company, very, very small. I curate and book all the lineups. along with Katie Mishler, who works with me on everything talent related. My business partner handles relationships with the city and with the production, and Jen Stiles still handles she's our festival director. Alex Jaffe still handles our, media and sponsorship. These are people that have been with us since the beginning. So we're still a very small, tight-knit group, and I guess we fall into the category of a small business.
So you did mention a lot of these events did take place like mid 2000s, early 2000s, I'd say. What major changes have you seen in like the live event industry from going from 2011 to 2023?
When we started the festival, and granted, we started it as a very small event that grew over in a few years, but by 2011, the festival business in the States had definitely started to grow. There was Coachella that was in Southern California. There was Lollapalooza, which is in Chicago, outside lands in San Francisco, Austin City Limits in Texas. But there really was no big festival in New York City, which was kind of our North Star, if you will. We wanted to be the first ones to do that. So we were able to do that. And I think by 2014 or so, maybe 2015, there was sort of like this gold rush of sorts where random people or random companies that, had access to a lot of money, would just find a location wherever the market was, spend a ton of money on talent, and just thought that would become a good festival. And it was proven pretty quickly that those festivals that kind of came out of nowhere and weren't really filling a hole in a marketplace, they went away pretty quickly. And so say by 2018 or 2019, like the wave rested a little bit. The festivals that kind of, again, served no purpose in their respective marketplace kind of went away. The ones that had filled that hole, whether it was us in New York City or Lala in Chicago, like all the ones I said. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but hopefully I did.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Kind of adding on that, since it's more, although New York isn't technically East Coast, but like when you think of festivals around here, I also think of like Boston Calling as well. You ever feel like you have to like compete against them at all, or?
No. Again, it's like it's different. It's just different markets.
Right.
Granted, we sell tickets in Boston, but you could also guess that it's because a lot of colleges are in Boston. And so if people are buying, we always have our on sale in January. If people are buying them technically in Boston, they could be from the greater tri-state area and they're purchasing them while they're in college. Yeah, whether it's Boston Calling in Boston, and there's us, and then there's Made in America in Philly. Again, we're all trying to keep using this phrase, but like we're all filling holes in the marketplace in our respective areas.
Right.
So no, there was as long as it's in a different market, everyone's doing their thing.
Makes sense.
I kind of want to like interject with a question. I don't know if you're able to see like which places like festival goers used to come from the most, but I'm assuming like outside of New York, where do you see your biggest ticket sales like coming from, like in terms of like geographical location?
Definitely the greater Northeast. Pretty much we go from Pennsylvania up to Maine. And then it depends on who's playing each year, like especially headliner wise. Like we had, this is going back to 2014, but we had, the First Strokes show in a few years. And so we got people flying in from the UK where they're huge. And there were certain headliners that didn't play California that certain year and who were big in California. So the vast majority are from the Northeast, especially the tri-state area. And then just from there, whether it's in the rest of the country or international, it pretty much depends on who the festival headliners are that year.
jumping off that, when it comes to like headliners, just looking at each year's bill, you can kind of see like the most popular artists, I feel like, of that year or that era. How did you guys like kind of handle becoming so big so quickly, I feel like, and like what was probably one of the toughest challenges of like having the festival getting so popular?
In terms of why we grew so quickly, it's because once people saw that a couple 20-year-olds with no financing could do a show in New York, bigger corporations with a lot more money than us, started to think, oh, I guess New York wants this now. Let's just outspend these guys, kind of kick them out of the city. We went from, just one day two-stage festival our first year. Year two, we moved it to 2 days with bigger talent. From our first year was Girl Talk and, a young Mac Miller and Pretty Lights, stuff like that. The second year was Beck, Fiona Apple, Major Lazer, artists of that size. Yeah, the first Fiona Apple show in New York in years. So we moved, pragmatically from 1 day to 2 days, kept the type of festival it was the same. But after second year, we started to hear all these rumors, like I said, about these bigger companies wanting to come in. So we just pushed all of our chips in to the middle of the table and went for a 3-day, 50,000 capacity each day music festival. And luckily it worked. It kept the bigger guys away. We succeeded. And in 3 years, we went from a 1 day to 2 day to 3 day, but we sort of planted GovBall's flag in becoming the big New York City music festival.
So you mentioned the first GovBall had a young Mac Miller. You are the talent recruiter, the curator of the lineups for all these festivals dating from then to now. Obviously, the artists you're recruiting on average are way bigger now. Kind of just for a personal preference, I was a big Mac Miller fan. What was it like for you to, contact him at the level that he was at, and then, just see that, but also like see how he grew into, the artist that he became over time, and knowing that you might have been like, one of the people that gave him that push, that gave him a lot of publicity in the live music arena.
Yeah. Like a lot of people, like I genuinely love music. So I was in my mid-20s when we started the festival. I knew about Mac Miller, obviously. And he was still very young. I mean, I don't think he had put out his first album yet. I think that was coming later in the year of 2011, I believe. But we were a young company. He was a young artist. I remember when he was in town it was before GovBall, but he was in town doing some shows earlier in the year, and we did like an interview with him in his hotel room. Anyway, and I just remember getting to know him, and he was such a funny, great guy. But I forgot your question. Anyway, but I don't know, Mac, with stuff like that, and it even happens up to today with big artists. I mean, there was Mac in 2011, but then, we had, this is fast forwarding a few years, but we had Dua Lipa play at 1 p.m., which is one of our opening slots in 2017. And now she's one of the biggest artists in the world. Same with Billie Eilish. She played in 2018 to 15 in the afternoon. Then she came back 3 years later and headlined our show. So we've, just as music fans, we get on artists very early because we do our digging, again, just as genuine music fans. And then we see how these huge artists progress.
Do you have a specific criteria that you look for, like monthly listeners, experience performing live, sort of portfolio? Obviously you want more discography so you can, pick apart the artist more, but what do you look for specifically?
Like if you look at like any of our lineups from the top down, you'll see like the headliners. Now that we're a big festival, are superstars. This year we have Kendrick and Lizzo, Odessa, artists that have really proven that they can sell tens of thousands of tickets, not just in New York, but everywhere. But as you make your way down, the lineup poster, you'll see whether it's, the Hyams and Rina Sawayamas, or you go way down the bill and see it's like more very up and coming young New York artists. That's how we do it every year. In terms of like how we decide, I want the festival to be as well curated as possible, not just have the biggest acts around. So in choosing the festival each year, it's not as easy as just inviting anybody to your birthday party. It comes into like, are acts recording a new album? Are they taking the year off? Are they playing Europe or South America at the time of that your festival takes place? And in choosing in terms of the artists that are available for that time of year, it's definitely like we take into consideration their Spotify numbers, their hard ticket history in New York. Did they play Radio City Music Hall the last time? So they're going to be even bigger the next time they come through New York. Have they played? Did they sell Bowery Ballroom? Then what are they going to do next? So your history and your streaming numbers definitely matter. Part of it's curation. Whether it's me with GovBall or other people who book other festivals, it's like a mixture of stats and intuition. Because you'll see big artists on the show and artists that are streaming well, but also you'll hopefully just see a very well curated show with multiple genres. Because you want acts that everyone has heard of, but you also want to introduce really cool artists to people who haven't seen or heard them before, because they'll come to the festival to see the acts they know. But if they're, when they're there all day, they can go explore the festival and see acts they haven't seen before.
I'm curious, what were your, if you could tell us, what were your audience numbers or participation for 2011 and then, 2022? Because, that must be like a huge difference.
Yeah. So we needed for the first year to sell around 12,000 tickets to break even economically. We got 18,000 people to show up. Because we were young and we booked a festival that we would want to go to, which we still do. So it went from 18,000 in 2011, and now we sell out at 55,000 per day. So it's grown.
Kind of more on the part where you want to be like New York's music festival, like the state's kind of attraction when it comes to festivals. The Brooklyn College of Vanguard labeled you like the pioneer for New York's music scene. Billboard has shout you out as a person 40 under 40, is one of the music biggest players. How does this kind of acknowledgement kind of feel to you now, like 10 years over into your career?
When you get some of these accolades, it feels great, just because a lot of time and sweat and stress goes into running your own business and being and even to today, it's like simultaneously a lot of you're very proud of yourself, but at the same time, for better or worse, you're stressed about everything. Whether it's because we can, to a certain extent, like a promoter can control everything except the weather. So we had in 12 years of the festival, we've had 2 days canceled. And again, GovBall's only 3 days out of the year. So if you lose one day, it's the worst emotionally. Anyway, when you get those sort of accolades, it really feels great considering how much effort we've put into it, since I was in high school. Because I don't know if they're legal anymore, but I just did a lot of unpaid internships. I'm in my later 30s now, so I hope that they don't have those anymore. But I worked for free for a lot of people who will remain nameless. But you're allowed to be proud of yourself every once in a while, and it was just good because a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
Like kind of translating your experience from, kind of being this, like entrepreneur for GovBall, making, mistakes and, highs and lows. It seems like you translated that to Connecticut with, sound on sound. And since you're from Connecticut, how has this differed from Governor's Ball? Like, is it sort of a passion project because you are a Connecticut resident? And how is it different from creating a music festival in New York City?
So I was born in New York, but I was raised in Connecticut, in Fairfield County. Growing up, and I actually moved back here. I'm here now with my family. In Fairfield County specifically, going to see big shows, you either took the train into New York or you drove an hour and a half up to Hartford. There was just nothing here. Like, to your question, that goes back to like me saying before, it's like you want to, no matter what business you're in as an entrepreneur, you want to fill a hole in the marketplace. There wasn't a big music event in Fairfield County. It's a much different show than GovBall. It's really it's aimed at, like, I'd say early 30s and up in terms of our age demographic. It's, if GovBall is over 50,000 a day, we cap at 30,000, even though it's a beautiful site. It's on the water. It's called Seaside Park. It's in Bridgeport. And so keeping it at 30,000 per day, it allows, I'd say, a more comfortable experience for the adults that are showing up. We focus a lot on like local food trucks and local restaurants to come to the show, and local breweries and things of that nature. So in a way, it's like a very local show. We had almost 30,000 people our first year. I think 68% of our zip report, it's like meaning the zip code of each credit card that buys a ticket. It was like almost 70% Fairfield County. So it is to a certain extent, a very local show. Like if you were a Dave Matthews and Tim Reynolds fan, or a Stevie Nicks fan, or a Zach Bryan fan, people traveled in for the show. But like I said, it's like if GovBall to a certain extent is an international event, this is very different in a good way.
And I was kind of wondering, like, building that brand, right? Like, you go from Neon, Indian, and Passion Pit for your first year in GovBall, right? And then you have like Kendrick Lamar, Lizzo, like these hard hitting headliners. I'm guessing that kind of gives you leverage in making sound on sound, where I don't think anybody else would be able to have Red Hot Chili Peppers and John Mayer on the same ticket. What was it like? Because it seems like GovBall's popularity was like exponential instead of like kind of like a linear progression. So can you tell us a little bit more about what it's like building a brand and relationships with those artists? Because it seems like a very like hard thing to do, like,
Yeah, like in general, like a lot of things, is just you build relationships. Like, someone's not going to be your best friend right away, but the more you spend time with each other, you're going to be, your relationship's going to grow. And we've been around since 2011. So some agents and managers, heads of record labels, I've just gotten to know the respective characters through the years. So yeah, just putting in the time, you really get to know these people better and better. A lot of times they become your friends as well as the people you do business with.
So I was also wondering, like, Connecticut's, it's like being a college student where, we see a lot of, like, Henry especially is familiar with the Connecticut indie scene. And it definitely seems like there's a high occurrence or high incidence of rock and punk bands here. And it seems like the two festival headliners do, they're like rock slash, I guess John Mayer is more like bluesy, but like still right in the last year was Stevie Nicks and Balloon News. So like growing up in Connecticut, has that influenced which headliners you choose? Like, does it just work out that like it's more rock oriented, or at least like with headliners?
Like in a similar fashion, where like GovBall, the first GovBall, like we were just booking a show that we would want to go to. It was kind of the same with the first year of Sound on Sound. Like, I'm from here, but I'm older than I was when I started GovBall. But I just know the marketplace, and I know and just being here, like I remember going to high school here, and like everyone was listening to Ben Harper and Dispatch, and just just the middle card of the lineup for this year. I think with Sound on Sound, if I had, Uzi or Arena Sawayama, I don't think it would work in Connecticut. So that's another reason why I went a little more like lazy adjective, but just went like a little more adult with this show. Because, you guys know Connecticut as well as I do. It's like there are some acts who can play very big venues in New York City, and they come through Connecticut and they're playing clubs. It's just like it's a very different market. In between New York City and Boston, you have Connecticut in the middle. In their like as many like the amount of tickets they can sell here is very different than those two big cities. And like I said before, there was this kind of like an opening to do a big show here because nothing existed here in terms of a big awesome show.
So kind of jumping off of the previous question, this year is going to be the 13th festival, right? The 13th year for GovBall.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm just curious, was it canceled due to COVID when like that was around?
Yeah, and in 2020 is the year we had to cancel, along with the rest of the world. So yeah, that was the only year we've missed since 2011.
So in terms of that, or I guess kind of like tangential to that, what mistakes have you learned from originally planning GovBall? It's kind of a two-parter. So like mistakes and maybe kind of like failures that you've learned from and, work to implement GovBall or worked to kind of better GovBall as a festival. And then how have those like mistakes and learning experiences translated into setting up Sound on Sound?
That is a great question. We try to make, and this is, I guess, speaking for GovBall first, we try to make the show better and better each year, but it always kind of revolves around three things, a great lineup, great food and beverages, but really also the experience of being there. Every year we try to have like really cool local artists, who are like able to build installations on a festival site. But from a practical production standpoint, if we see long lines in certain places, whether it's entering the show or at a food and beverage line or at a merch line, we always try to figure out how do we make lines shorter? How do we make like a quicker experience for fans to get what they want? To be candid, it took us until now to get to Flushing Meadows Corona Park. It's the venue we're in for this year. It's a beautiful park, easy to get to. Everyone knows it because it's right next to Citi Field and the US Open. Governor's Island, really cool island, but we grew out of that after the first year. Then we moved to Randall's Island, where we were for 8 or 9 years. And then we went to Citi Field, and now we're finally at Flushing Meadows. The previous venues we were at were great. They just had just issues. Governor's Island didn't have a bridge. Forget like how small it was, but like if we wanted to do a multi-day festival there, people would have been forced to like take the ferry there and back each day, which is really cool. It can be a fun ride, but it also can just take a while. So that again, we only were there for a year, but I could have seen that in the future being annoying. Similarly with Randall's Island, it didn't have any parking. And because of that, it wasn't easy to get to. Like, yeah, you could take an Uber to get there, but you wouldn't be able to park. So it was very difficult. Well, not very difficult, but like fans when the show ended, had to walk over the RFK Bridge, which again, is fine, safe, but a solid 20-minute walk or so. Again, you could take the 456 subway line to 125th. You still had to walk. So long story short, there wasn't a lot of transportation options to get there. Fast forward to Citi Field, while we were building our relationships with, the local residents of Queens, for 2 years, we were in a parking lot. You wouldn't, we did our best to put down turf and make it a great experience. But at least on our end, it was a parking lot. I don't know if either of you went to those shows. Luckily, we had good lineups and a good experience, but for the third time, I'll say it, we were in a parking lot, not exactly where you'd want to be as a big festival. So finally, we're able to be in Flushing Meadows Corona Park. And it's besides Central Park, it's probably the best known park in the 5 boroughs after Central Park. So we're also the first music festival to be in Flushing Meadows. So we worked hard to get there, but that was back to your question. We've really had to work. There were issues at the previous venues we were at for all the reasons I listed. So it took a while for us to get to this park, but we made it and we're here.
And then kind of like based off of that, with, in recent years, there's been a lot of unfortunately, there's been a lot of stuff at festivals that, has been, of course, there's always been just complete disasters, later Woodstock stuff. But, with something like Fire Festival, I think it was in 2017, and, the tragedy at Astroworld, recently, or not recently, but within the last few years, did that put more pressure on you? Did that put more pressure on you and other festival organizers, or your team, optically, to kind of implement safety changes that may have not been there before?
All it did for, I can only speak for my festival, but it just made us extra cautious to do what we usually do and provide a safe atmosphere for our festival. Because knock on wood, we've always had one. And yeah, it's not a long answer, but it just reinforced everything that we've done. And just to be extra careful with everything, whether it's crowd control, whether it's everything that are certain things that have happened at other festivals. But luckily, that's not how we've rolled for the first 12 years.
What would you say, or kind of, like you said, was the parking lot one the 2022?
It was
No,
21.
that was stadium, right?
It was 21 and 22.
Because I think I went last year, and that was really fun.
I went in 21 in the fall.
Yeah. To your point, yeah, if we had announced a music festival in January of 21, I think people would have thought we were completely insane. So we waited till May, and did it in the fall.
Like you mentioned, you guys are filling a hole in the market with these festivals, but it would be kind of silly to say that there's not more festivals that are growing and coming in and coming out. What do you guys think you'll be doing in the next few years that will make sure that the GovBall or even Sound on Sound will continue to stand out in these markets?
Yeah, I guess in short, it's really just a great lineup every year, because at the end of the day, that's why people go to me, is to see great music, and just providing a really fun, great atmosphere for everyone. I think the minute that we drop the ball on either of those, in terms of the artists and the experience, that won't be good. But I think that's how we'll stay in the market. Is just putting on a great show. Yeah. So I think I answered your question.
All right. Those are all the questions that we have. Jordan, thank you so much for taking the time again to do this. Co-founder of GovBall and Sound on Sound music festivals. GovBall is coming up in about a month, less than a month, and Sound on Sound later next year. Good luck with both of those.
Great. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice talking to you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.